Benchwarmers podcast. My name is Adam Den, Ethan Leviditis, and Michael Cormelos. Unfortunately, unable to join me. Just did not really feel like reliving last night's rather unfortunate events so quickly after, which I totally understand, as we'll get into right now. The Philadelphia 76ers suffering a Game 7 loss to the Atlanta Hawks, 103-96. And, I think I'm just going to break it down like I did the last time with the remainder of the NBA games. We'll get into Suns-Clippers a little bit too. And maybe talk a little bit about this Bucks-Hawks series that is coming up, which should be actually very, very exciting. But yeah, just to start with, the absolute disgrace, which was my team last night. The Philadelphia 76ers at home simply, did what they've done all series. The offensive production was unable to be there. A lot of people, the main takeaway for them has been the Ben Simmons thing, and I understand it completely. I've been a huge defender of Ben for, quite a long time. I've defended him, all season with the Defensive Player of the Year stuff, and even though Gobert's defense being more valuable, what he's done all across the floor, defended his lack of scoring throughout the regular season, and the playmaking, because of the playmaking that he's brought to this offense in this new Doc Rivers system. But this is just undefensible. I think, it really just comes down to it. And it might signal the end to Ben Simmons' career, honestly, as a Philadelphia 76er. You look at the numbers last night. He had 5 points, 13 rebounds, 8 assists throughout the series. 13 assists, 8 rebounds. Throughout the series, he's had averaged 10 points, 9 assists, 6 rebounds, 12, 9, and 8 throughout the playoffs. Counting also that Wizards series, which wasn't really much of a playoff series, to be honest, that Wizards team not being the most deep playoff team. But yeah, it gets to a point where the fit between him and Joel, which we have defended as Sixers fans for the past 3 years now, is gonna come to the limelight, especially in a big playoff situation. The reality has just become that this is not a team with the two of them on it, I feel like, that has the talent, as crazy as that sounds, to make it past the second round. And, we can do all the stuff about how they're both top 30 players. I wouldn't say Ben Simmons is now. But the scoring just not being there. We can talk all about the shooting, but just we need aggressiveness. Shaq said it on the postgame show last night. Just doing the things that he was even doing back in 2018 somewhat in the playoffs, and, being and attacking the rim, and, being an aggressive post-up option on some plays when Joel didn't have the ball in those situations. Running with the bench unit as a 5 and doing that. And I know Doc didn't do that very often, but, attacking the rim being the most significant part. That has just completely slipped off. We saw the dunk late last night. It was third quarter. That he just completely passed up on. And, Joel, post-game, that was what he pointed to as the main factor, the turning point. And I don't know that I would go there at all. This team overall, just offensively in the fourth, like they have for the past, probably, 4 games, just completely choked in the last 6 minutes of the game. But when you have a guy who's shooting 34.2% from the free throw line and is unable to finish on the court, and that's your superstar, and a guy who needs to be in the paint and probably needs the post-up touches to score, and just does not seem like a fit. I mean, that seems prime for change, honestly. And it really hurts to say that, just because Ben Simmons has probably been my favorite Sixer over the past 3 years. I just love watching what he can do in transition, fast break, the defender that he is. But I think it's what has to be done. And so then when we look at those options at the same time, it's pretty grim. It definitely is. CJ McCollum is the one that a lot of people have been throwing out. CJ having the second best season of his career statistically last year, putting up 23.1 per game, 14 and 7, shooting 45, 40, and 81 from the field. But I mean, are we really gonna give up Ben Simmons for, who would probably be an incredibly lackluster playmaker in CJ McCollum, although a great shooter, and although not a negative, for sure not a positive on the defensive end? I don't know that I would make that move, and I don't know that Portland, honestly, would be completely willing to make that move. Ben Simmons' value definitely is at an all-time low, and that's an organization that's kind of been hesitant to make any change whatsoever. But if we are going to put odds on stuff, I do think that is probably the most likely of the ones that people are throwing out. Another one was Porzingis, and I find that just absurd. To have a stretch 4 and trade Ben Simmons for that, when your problem with Ben Simmons is him not stepping up as the primary playmaker and shot creator in the playoffs, and not being aggressive enough. Porzingis was the exact opposite of aggressive throughout the entire postseason, and we talk about him being a stretch 4, he wasn't really even effective at that. He shot 29.6% from 3 throughout the entire regular season. Throughout the entire postseason. So that is not a move I would make whatsoever. Damian Lillard that's just absurd. I'm sorry. But to think that the Portland Trailblazers would be accepting Ben Simmons for Damian Lillard straight up, or Ben Simmons and picks for Damian Lillard, there's no shot. And Zach LaVine, which I think, if we're looking at the deadline, I think it's incredibly unlikely still. I think that would be a perfect fit. Just like I think Damian Lillard would be a perfect fit. But that's, both of them just probably completely, out of the league, not options. And that kind of comes down to my biggest problem with this team going into next year, is that there's just not really much room for change whatsoever. Besides this Ben trade that we keep talking about. Joel is going to continue to be the consistent presence that he is. Hopefully he can get better, get healthier. He had a good Game 7. He dropped 30, 13, and 4, had dropped 31, 11, and 13 throughout the entire series. But, Tobias is locked down. Tobias did not have a great Game 7. Most of these bench pieces are locked down. You look at guys like George Hill, Seth Curry, Maxey, Matisse, obviously, still on their rookie deals. There's really just not much room for change. And, I mean, that, especially with a bench unit that was probably in the bottom half of the league, I mean, there's going to need to be improvement for sure. Dwight Howard and Danny Green, I don't know what decisions they're going to make with them. Danny, I think, would probably, I mean, definitely at this point, take substantially less money. So it's going to, come down to your decision on whether or not you want to have him back. I think he made an incredible impact throughout the entire season with the way he spaced the floor. So I would definitely advocate for it. On Dwight Howard's case, I mean, I think it's good for team chemistry. He's a good rebounder, but I mean, the fact that Doc Rivers was even going 10 deep and even playing him in a playoff series, I found absolutely absurd. I get the thing with Joel, but I thought you could have run a lot more, either Ben at the 5 or Toby at the 5 offenses, just because his impact on that side of the floor was negative, and defensive too. I mean, the flagrant he did was pretty substantial and pretty bad, and just racking up the fouls overall, which is kind of what he does. It's kind of his role. But still, in that extended amount of minutes in a Game 7, I find that a little bit absurd. But yeah, really just, it's going to be a very, very strange offseason in Philadelphia. And, the fact that there's this much uncertainty 3 years in a row, I think should signal that there's change coming. But I really don't think it will, given, the complete hyped overhaul that was this offseason. I don't think, again, there's much change to be made. I would expect Elton Brand to stay. I expect and hope Daryl Morey will stay. I don't think these moves are for sure his fault. I do think the George Hill I do fault him for. But hopefully Hill improves going into next season. Sadly, he is locked down. But yeah, it's just not a bright future, I say. And I think I won't even say, I am disappointed. But I think after Game 5, this is something I honestly expected personally. Just with the way they'd been playing throughout this entire series. I just saw no path in which, a Hawks team that was just completely out hustling them, and offensively is as explosive as it is, with any guy able to get hot from deep any night. I just didn't see it. So we will see with this 76ers team. Of course, we'll be following, but definitely scary hours for sure. So to transition into the team I think we got to give props to, the Atlanta Hawks. This team, so young, so talented, really have to give them credit for what they were able to do during this series against such a veteran team and veteran presence. Trae Young, 21, 10, and 13 last night, but his playmaking is what brought the Hawks really back into this game and helped them get a win. Averaged 29, 14, and 3 throughout the entire series. And I think it's time to just say that he is a star and maybe even a superstar. We do this every year with players making this giant transition. I think we did it with Jimmy Butler somewhat last year, where a lot of people, he was already a star, but putting him into the superstar status and even some people's top tens after the run he had. I think Trae will go from, kind of this disrespected, I had him in the top 30, but barely. But now I'd probably put him top 20, honestly. It's hard because of his defense and the way you can just throw him in pick and roll. But even that, he's been substantially improved on throughout the playoffs. So, we'll see. But he is just, he's going to be a consistent presence throughout the league. for a long time to come. And I mean, we talk about X factors throughout this game 7 and throughout the series. I mean, they just have so many guys. Bojan Bogdanovic. I mean, I'm sorry, Bogdan. I get them mixed up. Bogdan was great. Hope his knee is okay. He has the potential to get hot any night. John Collins obviously had the poster on Joel, which should have definitely been an offensive foul. Strangling people as you dunk is generally not recommended. But, you know, he's still a fantastic big man. Provides so much length and athleticism, especially on the offensive end, and he is a solid defender. Danilo Gallinari still being a veteran presence at the age of 32, with his ability to hit consistent jumpers. Kevin Huerter, who had 25 in a game 7, not coming off the bench, but still, just insane. I mean, I was so upset with the way Seth was guarding him. Kind of disrespecting him, to be honest. Leaving him open a couple times. But, yeah, he is for real and will be, a great rotational player for the next couple years. Even Clint Capella. I've made fun of Clint Capella a lot throughout the series for how tough he's talked and then kind of gotten bullied by Joel Embiid, but he stepped up last night. So honestly, give credit to him. And I mean, I won't say I'm rooting for this Hawks team throughout the rest of the playoffs, because I'm kind of impartial now that my team's gone, and I'm really not. But I do respect them a lot for what they were able to do in this series. It's really cool for a young team like that. As far as their chances against Milwaukee, I can't say I see it. The Bucks, just, with their ability, I've said multiple times on this podcast, they do everything we do, but they do it better. They have that primary playmaker in Giannis, even though he shouldn't be the primary playmaker with the way they run their offense. But he's so fantastic, both as a finisher around the rim and as a passer even sometimes, and defensively. You have the defensive player of the years to show for it. Drew Holiday, probably the best pure guard defender in basketball and still a great scorer. Chris Middleton, consistent in the mid-range throughout. Mike Budenholzer is still a terrible coach and probably should still be fired. But I'm not going to say he stepped up during Game 7 because he really didn't. But there's just so much more talent. And the matchup against a guard-heavy Atlanta Hawks team we can say without the size, but they did really, shut down a team in ours that did have the size. But if I were to predict anything, I would say the Bucks in 6 games, just because, like I said, they are substantially more talented than us and should probably be the championship favorites now with Brooklyn gone. So then we get to Suns Clippers. The Suns getting a 120-114 win in the Western Conference Finals. Very exciting for Phoenix. It's only game 1. I should exaggerate stuff, but the step that Devin Booker took today or yesterday with Chris Paul out was just so incredible. He dropped 40, 13, and 11, and just completely took over that game. It became a duel basically between him and Paul George, and he completely outdueled him. George finished with 32. But, I mean, this Suns team is just so versatile. To have a guy like Mikal Bridges on the wing, who hurts me every time I see him play, the way he's such the perfect 3-and-D presence. DeAndre Ayton stepping up so much again, as he has throughout this entire playoffs. I forget who I heard talk about this. I think it might have been Stephen A. But, I mean, we look at guys like Gobert and guys like Porzingis, and the way they were unable to close out on shoot the Clippers 3-point shooters, and that being the Clippers' way to kind of take over games and take over series. I mean, we look at Game 6 and then just completely Terrence Mann just completely, I mean, bullying Gobert. But I mean, DeAndre Ayton, just with his speed, I mean, he's still 6'10", probably 220 pounds, but I mean, just his athleticism, just incredible. And I mean, we talk about rising stars like we just talked about Trae Young. DeAndre Ayton has to be up there as well. I mean, he's probably a top 40 player now, and that is just incredible, especially with what he was coming into the playoffs. I think he has cemented that he was deserving of that number one pick, or that he is on the path to be deserving of that number one pick. Even if, Luka and Trae will be better players, that's not the pick that you're stressed about. It's Marvin Bagley, for sure. As far as the Clippers go, Paul George just with another incredible game. The Zubac and Boogie thing is a problem. Both off of screen and roll are pretty terrible defenders. And even though Boogie had a good game offensively, both, in the paint, that became a pretty big problem with the guards like Booker and like Bridges, and even guys like Cameron Payne able to get into the mid-range and create. So that could be a huge problem throughout the series. But overall, this is just going to be such a fun series, really. These are two teams that have never won an NBA championship, battling it out. Both considered kind of miracles to get here. The Clippers from losing Kawhi, the Suns from just being the Suns and being, where they were in the NBA standings just a year ago. So I'm definitely looking forward to these Western Conference Finals for sure. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have. And we'll see what happens in these NBA series. We'll definitely be back to discuss both of them. And until then, fire Howie Roseman and fire Ben Simmons.